human paladin.
Human cleric.
We need more clerics in the world.
They're so good.
Oh yeah, I've already rolled a cleric for Chris's
Hello,
game,
friends. Welcome to D20 The Curtain, Behind the Curtain, where Oklahoma theater geeks hit record and explore their new addiction to Dungeons and Dragons. Today is a very special bonus episode, our first dedicated to the art of dungeon mastering. This is our first DM roundtable, and I am lucky to be joined by a few of the friends I've made in this amazing D&D community. So before we start our conversation, let me introduce our crew. I'm Jerome, Dungeon Master for D20 The Curtain, and joining me for this series of the Roundtable is an amazing and diverse group of fellow D&D fanatics. First of all, we have Mr. Taryn Pounds. Taryn, tell him about yourself.
Hey guys, yeah, I am Taryn Pounds, better known as Indestructible Boy over on all the social medias and over on YouTube, where you can check out my channel where I do a lot of homebrew design, a lot of talking about D&D, different character options, all that fun stuff. Just also some tips about how to be a better DM. So, oh, and you can go and find some of my stuff over on the DM's Guild, the creator of the Merchant class, a few other character options, and
Way cool.
Yeah.
Next up in our group, we have Miss Jasmine Jazzy Ramirez. She is our newbie, the most new. Tell us about yourself, Miss Jasmine.
Hi, I'm Jasmine, or Jazzy. I'm relatively new to D&D. I've been playing D&D for about a year, and I've been DMing for probably less than a month, but I'm getting better at it, so that's progress, and I'll take what I can get. So that's what I'm up to.
Awesome. We have Mr. Chris Honius, who is one of our first wise words on the show, and DM that I kind of got an early tutorial from. Chris, how you doing? And tell us about yourself.
Not too bad at all. Been playing for a little while. Was roped into the forever DM from the very beginning, and have stayed that way, but do get to play on the weekends. So
Wow.
I don't have a whole lot of social media presence, but if you search for my last name, you'll find me. There aren't a whole lot of us.
And rounding out our group, Mr. Joe Cox. How are you, sir?
I believe I'm well.
I'm glad. Good.
The world's on fire, so it's always in question.
Gotcha. Tell me what you're up to. Tell us about yourself.
I started playing D&D in high school, but it was very sparse and intermittent until about a few years ago, and I finally got a group or three together. And I would prefer to be a player, but I'm inadvertently DMing 2 of my 3 games. And if you'd like to reach me, you can search for Joe Cox, and you can get the right one within 3,000 or 4,000 guesses.
I'm glad you guys were able to sit in with me on this and just talk a little bit about DMing, man. I'm newbie, self-professed newbie DM, and so I'm always grateful when I get a chance to hear from anybody who is involved and is passionate about the hobby as I am. So let's jump right in. I want to start with this question. What the hell is DMing?
DMing is when a bunch of people are playing a video game, but they can't see it, and you're doing your best to tell them what's happening.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll riff on that. Where I think that DMing, D&D, I think of that as like the game engine. Your players are your players, and you as the DM are like all the world assets. You're the NPCs. You are the arbiter that's telling the players whether or not they succeed or fail. You're helping to kind of guide the story along. You are everything that is not the game and the players.
When I think of DMing, I usually call myself like the narrator or entertainer of a cohesive storytelling process between me and my players.
Okay.
Teamwork makes the dream work.
Yes, it does. Oh my God, yes, it does. Which is harder. It's easier said than done. I'll say that.
Agreed.
I love my players, but they know that.
When you DM, you're the person that sculpts everybody's imagination. You're the one that gives them the tools they need to get a good picture of it. So you're the eyes, the ears, and you're the voices. You're just everything about what's going on around your players.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting because, you usually say, I mean, everybody has their different language, but I'm going to get together with friends to play some D&D. Yes, it is. That's the Dungeon Master. You guys can't see it, but it's the Dungeon Master from the original cartoon in the, what was it, 80s?
Yeah.
That Jim was holding up. but you say, well, we're going to play some D&D. And I think it's interesting because I want to ask you guys as dungeon masters, when are you playing D&D with your players?
I mean, I'm entertained. I mean, like, you know, I think of it as like, yeah, you know, you have the prep work. For me, it's like the interesting thing of creating something. Whether or not that's, you know, anyone that's a creative that has like seen something go from concept to project to actualization. That's always a really rewarding experience. And I feel like, you know, you're providing the tool sets. You know, whenever we make like a magic item, we're like, I think it'd just be funny to see what happens with this thing. Mm-hmm. And then you throw it to the players and then you're like, don't know what's going to happen. You just kind of have to like let everything you control it, but you also just have to have, you know, just let everything go. I
am more on the side of my players than I should be. Like, I don't skew things for them in an unfair way, but in the back of my head, I'm just like hoping that, you know, they do the cool stuff and get the nice gear.
Oh, you got to be the cheerleader.
So kind of like another version or another level up from Bard. So like, I'm playing my song, I'm giving you an inspiration die. What you do with it, that's on you.
Right.
I hope it goes well.
I'd consider myself a player. I'm entertained throughout the process, and I'll give them a run for their money, though.
Right.
Oh yeah, definitely, you're the player. Like everybody in the room is a player together.
Right.
There is no game without the dungeon master, so it's definitely got to be the game.
Right.
You're the only person who has to show up.
Exactly.
Yeah. And sometimes the only one who does. No. Let's hope that's not
Nope,
the case.
That's pretty accurate.
That hasn't happened to me this week at all.
Oh, no.
Oh, man.
I try to remind my players all the time, and we're in some way experienced in storytelling. And yet, we're still finding our way towards the balance between the craft and the game. Because my players sit down at the table, they understand story beats, they understand giving, they understand sharing, but the minute they sit down at the table, their minds transform into players and they start thinking, I want to win. I want to beat you or somebody. So it's, what spells do I have and how can I do the coolest thing? And I'm like, I am not out to get you. I promise you, I'm on your side.
Yeah.
I want this story to ultimately be awesome. But obviously, there's no awesome story in Rocky if Rocky doesn't lose at some point. There is no cool Jaws if we hadn't first seen how dangerous the freaking shark is, and that means one of their pals is going to get eaten up.
Right.
That happens. That's part of the storytelling. When you add that element of risk, now you're off and running, man. Now we're interested in how this thing pans out. So,
I like the idea of like, you shouldn't be trying to kill the players, but the world should be deadly.
Yes. Great way of putting that.
The world that you're presenting should be a challenge, but it shouldn't be a goal. You come up with a deadly encounter idea or something like, there's an episode of Critical Role. I can't remember. I don't know for those of you that are keeping up with it, but the laughing.
Spoiler alert, guys. We're doing spoilers.
Okay. I don't think there's a huge spoiler here, but it's the laughing hand encounter whenever they first see that thing.
Okay.
And then Matt Mercer has the challenge of they know that they need to leave this fight, like it's not going their way.
Right.
And then there's a door that's closing down on them. And it's like, that is a very real thing that would have been built into this encounter if like this villain was trying to trap these guys in here with this thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, that was scary. And it took them, they almost didn't make it out, like all in one piece. And that's the kind of thing that like, I think us as DMs are trying to make that exciting experience where like, you're kind of on the edge of your seat, but like, it's such a tricky balance,
Yes.
It's like, just because you throw a dragon on them doesn't mean that it's appropriate to throw a dragon on them,
Yeah.
It's in the name.
Yeah.
It's not called kittens and kittens and
Kittens and corner stores. I'd play that.
You gotta take like that cinematic storytelling approach to it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Like if I was watching a film, what would I want it to look like?
Yeah, for sure. And what are the risks and what are the
Right. If I was just going to add like one other thing to that, it's like, just be sure that you don't fall into the trap of adversarial DMing. I always really hardcore speak out against people that adversarial DM, and that they think that the game is something that needs to be won. They think that the game is players versus the DM, and once you fall into that, and it can be kind of easy once you just hear about D&D and you think like, this isn't like any other game, and that there's not really like winner and a loser. You know, it's that this is something that we do for fun to entertain ourselves, and then we put it down and pick it up next week. You know, but like whenever you step into the idea of you're not just the DM, you are the villain. That's where I'm like, that tends to create some problems. You know, the DM's not out to win; the villain is. Right. So don't fall into that trap.
Yeah, it's the villains of the story, the big bads, as it were, they have a real need. They want something. They're after something.
The villain wants.
Yeah, and that's what makes them heroes. That's a story that's worth following. It's archetypal, and there's a reason that it is, because we know it. We value that story.
Yeah, and that you touched on like what the villain wants. You know, it's like what the monsters want. My ultimate tip for anyone that's thinking like I'm having trouble coming up with this story is like, consider that. What does your antagonist want? As soon as you know that, the story writes itself. Right. Like it just tends to like, it makes it way easier to sit there and be like, all right, so he's got this dungeon, but like, okay, why did he build this dungeon? What did he want out of building this dungeon? Did he just want to kill people? In that case, it's like, all right, what, like, you know, whatever. But
is he just remodeling?
Yeah, or it's an important site. Like maybe there's a portal that only opens up in this specific area of the world, and he's like, I need this here. I want this dungeon here. Like, so I need to build like defenses around it. You know, I need to. Maybe what kind of portal is it? Is it a portal to like the primordial like planes? Cool. So I can inhabit this with some of the elementals that just kind of like poof out of this thing. Once you kind of figure that out, I think that the story tends to just sort of like fill itself in.
Did you find did you fall into DMing? Was this something that you said, I want to do this? Or was it, you know, there was nobody else to do it?
I wanted to so bad.
Really?
So bad. I was impatiently waiting to get my Dungeon Master's Guide to open up a campaign. Because I was so ready for it. I really wanted to.
And now?
Oh, I absolutely love it.
Nice.
Okay.
Session 3.
Session 3.
When Dice Camera Action was a thing, Chris Perkins DMing was just so glorious that I was all like, I want to do that. And that is where I'm at now.
Right. Such an underrated DM.
He's my favorite DM and inspiration.
I think once you watch Chris Perkins, you really understand A, rule of cool, and then B, like when it's good to move towards like what's going to be great for this moment. Because like what's the good fun DM mentality, you know? Because you can tell everyone at his table loves being there. Just loves
having
it.
a good time.
Just his storytelling. Like there was he went in Dice Camera Action. There was a scene, and one of the characters was a construct, so she can't cry or anything, but he's like, yeah, it's raining, and like she can't cry, but the rain is just cascading down her face, and the way it looks like she's crying. And it broke my heart. And it's just, the storytelling is amazing. It's that cinematic storytelling, and it gets me every time.
Yeah.
If you're not like, Matt Mercer is an amazing storyteller, but also voice actor. Chris Perkins is an amazing storyteller, but not a great voice actor. So like, for those of you that aren't really like super comfortable with like, you know, putting on the female voices or doing whatever, it's good to watch Chris Perkins and feel like, hey, he's just great at running the game. You know, he knows the rules, partially because he helped write them.
That helped.
But yeah, like he's just really good at running the game, but not really needing all the crazy flair to really keep the game going.
Right. There's going to be a ton of people who don't know the basics, so I'm going to really try to emphasize those. So let's start here. Explain to me the rule of cool.
Ooh.
When your player comes up with something and it's like, oh, that just has to happen. Like whatever it is, it's you want to do a backflip onto the back of the dragon and you want to stab it in the back of the head, roll a dex save. Roll a dex. Like do it now.
See what happens.
Whatever it is.
And even if they fail, something also cool could happen. Like, oh no, you dropped the sword in midair and it landed in the dragon's eye. Oops.
If it can be done, why not let them try it?
Exactly.
Mhm.
Even if maybe it can't be done, let them try it
Yeah.
and fail.
If an idea it sounds so good that you want it to work, let it work.
Mhm.
That's really cool. Like that, yeah. I love those moments. Those are the moments that I really live for. You know, whenever you can get outside of the rules for a second and just be like, that's so much better than anything that this book is going to let us do. So yes, you can do
You
it.
get some of the best stories that way. An example that happened in my home game. So one of my players bought a cask of beer and a donkey to carry it. And they went out into the woods and they come up on an owlbear and somehow managed to roll stealth enough to sneak up on this owlbear with a donkey and heavy armor and everything.
The cast of beer.
And then the fighter who's wearing the heavy armor and bought the cask is like, I want to get on the good side of the owlbear. I'm like, what are you offering the owlbear? Because it just wants to eat you.
Mhm.
If it knows you're there, it wants to eat you. And goes, I give it the beer. I literally couldn't say anything for like 5 whole minutes. I'm just stammering. And I'm like, yeah, do it. Like, you open up the cask, which gets the bear's attention. Let's roll a charisma check with super disadvantage, and hope you roll high. And he rolled 2 nat 20s in a row.
You're kidding me.
No, and he has a +2 modifier, so that's 22. That puts him over the 20 mark. I'm like,
You're drinking buddies.
he goes
Right.
after the beer. And now I have an owlbear that loves beer. And that was going to come back and hide him.
Yeah.
Or hurt him on occasion. Like, you're having a drink at the bar? Let me roll a percentile die. Let's see how that goes.
Guess who's coming to be on your tab tonight?
Albert's just sitting quietly in a corner, like with a big mug.
A lot of my really cool stories are the adventurers hiring the mid boss out from Underbane.
Hiring them.
Yeah, you're in a situation where a boss is pointing out a bunch of underlings to try and kill you, and you just make a really, really, really good job off it. And that has happened in multiple games, in multiple completely different people, and insane rolls. Not 2 nat 20s in a roll, but
Wow.
close.
Right.
Wow.
It's like, well, I guess this character works for you now. All right.
I had a shopkeeper that owned his name was Dorkin. He was an awakened giant octopus. And Dorkin was a seller of magic items, and his whole like shop was basically like a bunch of different pools. And so whenever you go up to him and talk to the counter and say like, hey, what do we want? He would just stick his tentacles down and like go and grab the item from one of the shelves and like bring it back down or whatever. They knew that they were going to be doing this big uprising, and they were like, okay, we need help. Like, we know that you've got a crazy stock. How does the like city guard treat you? Like, how do you feel about the government? And I was like, he's a giant octopus. I don't know what he thinks. It's I'm sitting there like, coming up with this. I'm improvising this whole story of like, well, you know, they kind of like persecute me. They don't really, they tax me too high and whatever. And like I forget. I think it was my buddy Sean that just like rolled incredibly well on persuasion checks and convinced him to like join up with their uprising, thinking that he was going to be like, I'm just going to outfit you guys with magic items or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't expect this octopus to show up on a big like rolling cart with like 8 wands of wonders just firing them off. And I was just like, that just added, they basically like made a beholder in a way. And so I just basically ran him as that, like, he's going to fire off 2 charges of these magic wands that he's got. And I don't know which one it's going to be. And that was just one of those, like, they weren't expecting that. And they get into the middle of the fight and suddenly he shows up. And it was just like, I knew that was going to be insane. And I just thought it would be really funny. And I just like rolled with it, you know.
Within my 3 sessions, I think it was like it was either my first or second session. One of the characters got stuck in like this area enclosed in with a portcullis, and they used their action to move a lever. They got trapped in the thing, so they're like, shoot, I don't have any more actions. So they're like, can I just run and backflip off of it and try to move the lever again? And I'm just like, you shouldn't be able to, but I want to see what happens. And,
Yeah.
well, she rolled a nat 1 and she fell and broke the lever. So I was like, sorry. That's how it is. It was worth a try. It was worth a
Yes.
try.
Yes. Getting a group of adults at a table and saying, for the next 3-4 hours, it is completely okay and encouraged for you to play make-believe. That is freaking awesome. Adults doing that. Because we've been told our whole life, stop daydreaming, stop pretending. You know, that's not what grown-ups, cool people do. Adults do that. And then there was the group of people who said, no, that's relegated to nerds now. But now nerd culture has become pop culture.
Yeah.
Big Bang, Marvel, Lord of the Rings. It's acceptable for all of us to play pretend. And that's absolutely cool. And to be able to dig into the minds of just not only the players, but these dungeon masters who are saying, yes, you can hire a underboss. Yes, you can. An owlbear would become your drinking buddy.
Right. I always like the thought of like, yeah, there were the popular kids in school, but there were like 5 of them. There were like 200 of us nerds. So that's why
Right.
pop culture is becoming nerd culture, is because there's a lot more people that loved watching, you know, Saturday morning cartoons than liked watching, you know, Real World. Like,
Right. Can you be both? Because I was both.
I mean, hey, it's whatever you're into. I was like, I mean, you know, for me, I was always
You
really
can multi-class if you want.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks.
I was really into Dragon Ball Z, and my sister just couldn't stand it. And it was always like Real World and Dragon Ball Z were always playing at the exact same time back whenever we were kids.
Right.
So it was always a big fight into like, who got to watch some TV right now, you know? I missed out on the food saga thanks to her, but that's fine.
Dragon Ball Z. So I have to ask, how did you guys discover Dungeons and Dragons? How did you get into this whole thing to begin with?
I'm just really nerdy. So it was like a prereq.
Okay.
Hey, little Joe, you're 5 years old. Here's something called Dungeons and Dragons. You're gonna have to wait a while for it, but buckle up.
You got introduced into D&D when you were 5?
I mean, that's the first time I remember hearing about it.
Wow. Okay.
And I had no idea what it was until I was like 16. So it was just this amorphous.
Wow.
Yeah, it was like I was 13 and I had heard about role-playing games. I remember seeing an episode of Dexter's Lab where like Dexter was playing like D&D, and I was like, what is this game? It looks really cool though. Like, and I just never really figured out like, oh, it's D&D. Okay. Like, and then I had gotten an invitation to go play 3.5 like back when I was like, I don't know, 15. I was like, I went and I just wasn't really sure what all was going on. Because it wasn't really the kind of group that was good at explaining that stuff to a newbie. They had all been playing forever. And like no one really took the time to be like, hey, well, okay, so we're not trying to win here. It's like we're trying to, you know, overcome obstacles and whatever. So I didn't really appreciate it all that much until like I got to be about 23, 24. And just from like, you know, me after being in this like accident I was in, having to go through multiple surgeries and recoveries and stuff, I got to watching a lot of different like D&D podcast or D&D like live streams and stuff. And then I saw Harmon Quest, and then I saw Acquisitions Incorporated.
Right.
And then I got into Critical Role, and I was like, all right, I got to check this game out. This sounds way too fun. I put out some feelers and started actually getting into it, and I was like, why am I only finding this now whenever I'm almost 30? Like, wow. You know,
yeah, I know the feeling.
16-year-old Taryn would have loved this, you know, but now I write content for this game that I ignored for so long.
You mentioned Harmon Quest, and one thing I stole from that is Spencer Crittenden's line of, that happens.
Right.
If anything ever occurs and I have nothing to contribute, that happens.
He's another really great DM.
Congratulations, you have succeeded in your attempt at having a beer.
Whatever that was, yeah.
I was like a super like nerdy child. Me and my sister started off with like cosplay and stuff, and we'd used to like before we went to bed, we'd tell like role playing stories and just continue.
Yay.
And we like it wasn't D&D because there was like no dice rolling, but we had this entire role play story for like 3 years and every single night. And then around last year, I discovered that one of my favorite voice actors, Zach Callison from Steven Universe, was in a show called Dark and Dicey. So I watched that, and then it led me to Dice Camera Action and so on and so forth. And now I'm DMing. Evolution.
Yeah, you took a kind of a straight route.
So it sounds like you were DMing like you're the entire time. You just eventually realized, oh, that's what you've been doing the whole time.
There's a name for it. It's such a cool thing.
Right.
I had this hobby of making models, and like model airplanes and crap, and had a daughter, and can't have that kind of paint laying around or that
right.
that airbrush blowing anymore, because that's a little toxic for a newborn. So I had to find a hobby that I could spend too much money on and
too much
and still have fun. So I started checking around, reading a couple of things, and I'd always been aware of Dungeons and Dragons. That was that nerdy step that, like, I was really into comic books and I was really into reading fantasy, but at least I didn't play D&D. It was like that. It was that line, and then I'm like, you know what? I'm 35 years old. I don't have to worry about what other people think of me anymore. I'm me.
Right.
And I'm like,
Exactly.
let me check out this Dungeons and Dragons. And I looked into it, and I'm like, okay, how am I going to do this? And one of my friends is like, why don't you watch Heroes and Halfways on YouTube with Rooster Teeth? And
Oh, I forgot they did one.
yeah, and I watched the first season of that, and I was like, well, if these dumbasses can play, I can do it. So that's what we did. I went ahead and bought the starter kit, and by the time that I got in and got a couple of friends together to play, and about the third or fourth page in, I knew that it was over and that I was hooked. And since then, I've spent way too much money, just like you should on a good hobby.
I'm married to a professed nerd. We're both pretty big nerds about the things we're nerds about. I happen to be a theater nerd, and she's a comic book fan and obsessive about watching Critical Role. I mean, you cannot talk to my wife on Thursday nights because the game's coming on. And I'm watching her watch this thing, and, you know, it's super intimidating looking at it because Mercer's so good, and you don't understand how anybody could remember that many rules. But I knew she was crazy about it, and I thought, I'm going to do this for her 40th birthday. And I was going to hire a guy. I was going to, you know, find out what the rate would be, and you hire the dungeon master and you invite friends, and I thought, I'll play. But ended up going to our local gaming store. Those guys were super cool and super generous with their time and information and said, hey, just buy this book, see what you think. So I bought the player's guide and the dungeon master's guide and started to read through them and thought, I can do this. This is essentially directing a play. But it's on its feet and you have to be ready to move on a swivel. And so we had this thing for her birthday, and I fell in love with it just as much as she did. She fell back in love with it, playing and not just watching it. And I was like, I think this is fun. And not only is it fun, it sharpens skills that I use as a director, as an actor, as a person, because storytelling is valuable to us as human beings. So I'm always really curious to know how people started, and maybe just as equally, what kept them from it. Because that sense of, boy, you're going to lose any cool points you might have is constant.
I always liken it to, like, you go to a concert and then someone hands you something that smells pretty funny and they're just like, hey man, you want to try the next level? Like, you want to see what's going on, you know? Like, there's that feeling I think a lot of people have where they're apprehensive to try something new, especially with D&D, because they've heard things like, yeah, people get made fun of for playing this game or whatever. And then you actually try it and you're like, oh wait, it was a lot of fun. And, you know, I hate to liken it to, like, something that's addictive, but you feel apprehensive because you feel like, I'm going to take that step into being nerdy, really? Like, whatever. But then you actually do it and you're like, wait, this is awesome. Screw everybody else, you know? Like, this is great. Like of everything else I could be doing right now, I'm playing Pretend with my friends, and it's a lot of like fun. Like, you know, I think it gets you more in touch with, and you start to know the people that you play D&D with a lot better, because you're a lot more, you could say vulnerable in a way, but I think a lot more just kind of yourself whenever you are improvising in that, because you're more willing to just be like off the cuff, and you got to be loose,
not guarded.
Yeah. It's I hate to call it like an intimate thing, but it kind of is. You know, you gotta like be comfortable with the people. You gotta be comfortable being yourself, I think, around those people to really be somebody else.
Well, yeah. I mean, one of the first things I did when I was learning how to play it is I called Chris and said, "Would you mind spending an hour with me, or half hour talking it through?" I left that conversation, and I was like on fire, like, "Oh my God, and here's the thing," and he bought the stuff, and my wife says to me, "First of all, what you're experiencing is a man crush. Second of all, you don't have to have all the stuff today."
Right.
And I was like, "Oh no, he has this, and if you don't have this, because he talked about..."
No. I tell everybody, do not buy all the crap I bought in the first 3 months. Just like, don't just hold back. See what your players buy. Okay, if your players go out and buy their own minis, maybe you can buy a couple of minis for those big bad guys.
Yeah.
For that special occasion. Okay, don't go out and buy 6-player handbooks to hand out. See if your players buy their own handbook. Like, just hit the brake and relax for a second.
I wish I could have done that, man. I was a cartoon character when I came home. I had those big hearts in my eyes. I was like, I was like, I'm going to have, and there will be a room dedicated to all of my stuff. And thankfully, my wife, talks me off the ledge. However, we did start podcasting about a year after that. So what are you gonna do?
now you're getting a little bit of a return on your investment, right? Because it's actually like, for me, that's the big thing is like, sure, I've got like all those books back there, I got all those minis, whatever, like, but it was all kind of on a path to what's now kind of becoming a job for me. Writing and making content that's actually making me, that's not a huge chunk of change, but a nice chunk of change. Right. It's starting to finally return on that investment. It's expensive, and it's actually led me to try and I'm going to do a video series on just like a D&D buyer's guide, where it's like, cool, what do you need whenever you're first getting into the game? Because like you see all these books and you're like, Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes, Xanthar's Guide to Everything. Like the branding is a little confusing.
Everything, so you don't need anything else, right?
Yeah, right?
Yeah. So, just something that's like, depends on what level of engagement you want to get out of the game. Like, here's what you need to get.
Tell me about running your first games.
Oh God. Oh my God.
Everybody exhales. First of all, did you have all the cool stuff? And two, what did you do when you were running it?
Oh my God. Okay, so starter kit, Lost Mines of Fendelver. I'd read that book twice over by the time we started. Okay. I had all the rules memorized, and I even had like a 20-minute starting speech for introduction to the rules.
Wow.
Oh, it was horrible. Like, I would not have wanted to show up for that game. But luckily, only 2 people did.
Okay.
Of the 6 people that were invited. So only those 2 people got that speech initially. And then the rest showed up for the game after that.
Oh, good.
Where I didn't have a speech ready, and we actually had fun. But like, a lot of crazy things happened that first game because while I sat there and memorized the rules, I did not actually memorize the rules, at least not in a at the top of my head kind of thing. Sure. So my dwarf may have thrown a horse at a goblin.
Damn, that's a strong dwarf.
My fighter may have stealthed so well that he stepped on top of a goblin.
Wow.
All my markers for the map were just those clear colored plastic tokens.
Like, wait, are you talking about for like bingo, where like old lady?
Yeah,
really?
That is exactly, yeah. That were like I separated all the red ones from all the other colors.
Oh, that works. That's brilliant.
And those were the bad guys. And then the players got to pick theirs. I bought a pound of dice.
Wow.
Which had individual sets already sorted. Like, at that point, I should have realized that I had already spent too much money. And then when two people showed up, I realized I should have realized that I spent way too much money.
Wow.
I should have stuck with my $20 starter kit at first. But no, it was as horrible as that game was, I had a blast.
Right.
And the two people that came over had a blast. One of them got to throw a horse.
Yeah.
Who gets to throw a horse?
Yeah. That in itself is worth it.
One of them got to shoot a goblin and cut off its head after it had willingly passed information. And I got to yell at him for killing a trapped prisoner. Trapped unarmed prisoner. Like, lots of mistakes were made, but I remember that game really well, and I would not trade it for anything.
I had a set of dice. I had borrowed. This was 4th edition.
Okay.
First time I ever tried my hand at DMing. I had planned 2 levels of the dungeon, and each level, there was probably more. I wouldn't have stopped there, but that's as far as we got. Each level had one creature. The first was a forest, and there was a bugbear that had a big sack that said swag on it. And the hook was that he was just cleaning up the forest. So the players, of course, attacked and killed him, and the forest had to find a new janitor.
Wow.
Below that, there was a cubicle-ridden area of like lower management of hell, and there was a large demon sitting there working, listening to his iPod, and the players attacked him too.
Sure.
And I forget what was going on after that, but yeah, that's when I learned I shouldn't rent my own stuff.
I don't know. Somebody had a good time with it.
The first time I ever actually got behind the DM screen was like, I put out just kind of like a feeler on Facebook that I was like, hey, I'd like to like try to DM a group. You know, this is like 3 or 4 years ago. And then I got contacted by a guy who, I mean, I don't even remember his name these days. But he was like, hey, my wife and a bunch of her friends are looking to get involved with the D&D group, and we've been trying to find a good DM. Are you interested? And I was like, I mean, if you want to give me a shot, I guess, but like, I don't really know, like, I don't know that I'm a good DM, but I can try. So I show up, and come to find out, his wife is a archaeology professor at TU, and 3 of the other players are physicists.
Oh God.
So I thought that I was super clever, and that I had set up all these ciphers and like cool little puzzles and stuff.
Oh.
There was a room. It was like I set up like a 5-room dungeon because I was told like, hey, 5 rooms, that's enough for a 1-shot, you know. And I was like, all right, cool. And then they'd have this like encounter, and it was whatever. Literally every puzzle I threw in front of these guys, they figured out in 2 minutes. That session wrapped up in an hour and a half.
Wow.
Yeah, and they were all like, I mean, towards the end, they were like, wait, that's it? And I was like, yeah.
You ate all my stuff.
Well, thanks for playing, you know.
It's been real.
Yeah, and you know, I learned from that, but like, it just really pays to have the session 0. You know, you do the 1-shots with your friends and stuff, that's whatever. But like, it really pays to at least go out and get a beer with the people you're going to play with, you know, before you actually sit down to the table.
No,
because then I would have known not to prep like all puzzles for this super brilliant party.
Yeah, this group of geniuses.
It was, yeah.
Each one was the last Starfighter.
Wow. Jasmine? You've had yours recently.
Yeah, but at this point, it's like, I think, what, 4 weeks ago? Because I've missed like a week. But yeah, I had a pretty similar beginning, but I put like a post on Facebook, and it was like a full-out application. I was like, I need to know everything, and that you're willing to come every session. And the group of people I picked are amazing. They've never missed. They're super great, and I'm super thankful for them. But my first session, I chose to run a one shot, which was made by Dungeon Class. It's on YouTube, and I was like, "Oh, this sounds fun. I like it." And in their description, they said like, "Click our link, and you could like subscribe to our Patreon to get the file." It's nowhere to be found on this planet. So I took the story and pretty much homebrewed everything else because I was like, "Well." And
Nice.
I said one shot. You can't see my quotation marks, but they're there because I think my players just finished it after our third session.
Wow, I know that feeling.
Yeah, it was fun. There was no holding back. I think the first encounter they had, I put like 15 kobolds at them, and they're level 1 players trying their best to survive.
I mean, they could do pretty well.
They did great. But it was a wild ride.
Because it's not written out anywhere, you're having to create all the
Everything.
checks.
I have like a 16-page thing of what I assume this adventure should be. So if Dungeon Class, if you ever see this, please put out the link.
I'm gonna put that in the show notes just so they know. We need the link.
We need the link. I would have paid for it.
What's the one shot called? So we can make sure.
Trouble at Bone Gulch. And it was great.
I think I've heard of that.
The concept was great and I adored it, but it had no information on it except like the bare bone outline. So I took it and made of it what I could.
Right.
It took 3 sessions, but we did it.
Yeah.
But you start working, you start thinking in that mindset. That's awesome.
Oh my gosh, I've grown so much since then.
So let's talk about this. I'm a new person. I want a dungeon master, I think.
Right.
I've made this decision. I want to do it. What do I do next?
I would
panic.
It's because it really is a freaking like, okay, I want to do it. Now what?
Any experience with this dungeon master? They had never played before. They're just like
maybe you've watched a Critical Role somewhere. They've seen, they listened to the Adventure Zone.
Right.
Hell, if it's anything like me, you saw a couple of guys playing Magic the Gathering and thought that was D&D. Like you're like, okay, I think it's that. I gotta go get some cards, maybe. I don't know. Like.
Honestly, I'd say go get a module.
Mhm.
Like, get a starter kit, and it has everything in it. It has a little book that gives you one quick adventure. Okay, it gives you a little sub-sized version of the player's handbook with all the important rules and stuff in it. Okay, not a lot of the extra junk. Your module book has the monsters that you're going to have to deal with for your story, and only the monsters that you're going to have to deal with for your story. So you don't have to worry about, am I going to kill my players if I choose to? Oh, surely they can take just a regular adult dragon instead of a young
Just one.
adult dragon at level 4. Like, you don't have to worry about making a mistake because your players will be able to handle almost anything that's in that book. And it lets you learn, it lets you know what the rules are, it gives you hints about, hey, your players walk into this room, here's some stuff you can say about this room,
right,
to help describe it. And like, that can even be the starting point of where you start building your own narrative, because I think it was Adventure Zone started their podcast with Minds of Fandelver.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. And then they started going off book.
Right.
They were like, no, I don't think that's interesting. I'm going to do this. And I'm going to do this. And then their whole story starts from there. But their first 2 sessions are like straight out of the freaking module. Okay. It is, this happened. These were the bad guys. These were the characters. This is the location.
Right.
Straight out of the Minds of Fandelver. And if that's what you need to just get used to it, then there's not a problem with using a module for that.
Yeah. I'll to add to that, it would be worth it. Like, I think as a brand new dungeon master, if you do buy like Lost Minds of Fandelver or like Curse of Strahd or like an adventure, whatever, to find a podcast that's actually running that adventure and kind of follow along, like with how is that dungeon master pacing out like the different parts of the information, just so that you can kind of feel like, okay, pacing, learning, like, all right, we're right here right now, got about 30 minutes before we need to be in this section to like wrap this up by tonight, or whatever.
I think the first thing I got was my Lost Minds Fandelver starter kit. I got that before I got anything because I was so interested that I wanted to start something. And then as more time went on, I got my player's handbook, and then I got my DMG. I just still don't have the monster manual, and I'm doing just fine, but I'm going to buy it somewhere down the line. We'll get it.
Sure.
And the most interesting thing is that the more you get comfortable with it, like just read it through a few times or like chapter and know what you like and what you don't like about it, because it offers the meet me in Fandover route, and it gives you an introduction. Well, I saw that and I decided to take my players into the Shadowfell. So do what you want.
Be prepared. Yes.
We talked about it before. The book gives you the A through the Z, but the B through the Y is all your own. And make it what fits best for your party and your campaign and what you like too, because it should be fun for you too.
Yeah. Because like we said, you're a player. You're also playing the game.
If I were going to make a DM with an alchemy formula, you would play at least one session as a player, take an improv class, and a creative writing class.
Right.
Then jam all that together and then go.
Yeah, just get to it.
But like that improv thing, a really great tool is learning like yes and exercises. Because like, I mean, once I had really checked those out, and like we even play a game where like, you know, before a session, we'll do the like, someone has to say the word of a sentence and then someone else says the next word. And then I'm just getting everybody kind of used to thinking of that as like, okay, we're kind of building this little tiny story together, you know, like it's just kind of fun to get people into that headspace before you really get going with the game.
I like that alchemy. I like that idea that you can put these ingredients together. I kind of go back to those fundamental core rules, not the DMG, yes, the player's hand guide is very valuable. And I think if you're going to read any book, that was the one that I got the most value out of page for page. But then it's simply, you're creating the world, whether it's through a module or from your own imagination. You have to communicate that world to your players. Then they are going to make an attempt to interact with the world. And you reward them in that. Not even you tell them what happens. You reward them in their attempt. Because again, it's everybody going, is this too weird? Do I seem like a dork to do this? Because I'm basically putting on a cape in front of my friends and pretending I can fly. And you're saying, absolutely not. It's the coolest thing in the world.
Right.
And you're building that trust between each other. So you're saying I could pull on the reins and stop the horse. Why don't you give him a pull? And then you pull on him and the horse stopped. You know, I did that because I think that
happens.
Yeah, that happens. Absolutely. Yeah. And if you can get there and then say, to make this story even cooler, sometimes you're going to fail. Sometimes you're not going to be successful, but it's only going to make it pay off even greater when you do succeed. And now we're off and running. Full disclosure, like you guys said, you're going to have to at some point come back and learn some rules, or at least learn how to access them. But you've got reference books in front of you that can actually be at the table. You don't have to memorize them.
Right.
But that's not where you have to start.
Right.
To do this. Would you agree?
Oh yeah.
Wizards of the Coast is very intentional in what they name their core books. Player's Handbook, Dungeon Master's Guide, Monster Manual. Nothing says rule book.
Right.
Nothing's set in stone. It's all just stuff to let you like, look, here's the system. Do what works for you. D&D is very intentionally designed to favor the players. You know, like, because if you throw a CR1 creature in front of a party of 4, like level 1 characters, 99 times out of 100, unless like these dice are just hating your players that night, they're going to wipe it. It doesn't always favor your monsters. You know, and D&D is kind of intentionally designed that way, because ideally at the end of a session, the player should be walking away from it feeling like they really overcame something. And part of that is the players need to feel strong. You want to play a really, really gritty game, go play Call of Cthulhu. Or
yeah, so I've heard.
You have a flashlight to go fight an Eldritch God.
As you can imagine, the Roundtable had even more insight and advice to share with new and potential Dungeon Masters. We will provide that content in the weeks ahead. We will also be sitting down with even more DMs from all across the community to hear their stories and perspective about this game we love so much. Have you got insights to share? Please reach out to us. Leave us an email or a voicemail at d20thecurtain.com. Your story is just the inspiration someone needs to play or DM their very first session. So please, let our community hear from you. We'd also like to take this moment to remind you that there are still a few slots left at the table for our special one-shot of Harper's Tale. Players for this episode will be 16 and under. If you or a young person you know would like to be considered to play in this special episode, get your parents' permission and leave us a voicemail at d20thecurtain.com. In it, tell us your name, what part of the world you're from, country, state, or region is plenty, and why you love or think you might love Dungeons and Dragons. So whether you or your favorite young adventurer have been playing for years or have never actually played but have wanted to ever since you first saw Stranger Things, we want to hear from you. In the meantime, we want you all to stay safe, have fun, be kind, and play the role.